Wyoming Territory, 1875. The scent of smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the dust of the trail as Hazel Valens stood before the charred remains of what had once been her home. Her dark brown hair, usually neatly pinned, had fallen loose around her shoulders, and her blue calico dress was smudged with ash. At 24 years old, she had already endured more heartache than most women twice her age. The small ranch house she had shared with her husband James for 3 short years was now nothing more than a blackened skeleton against the vast Wyoming sky. "I told you not to marry that man," her mother-in-law had written in her last letter. "The frontier is no place for decent folk. Come back east where you belong." Hazel crushed the letter in her fist. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, that much was true. James had died 6 months ago when a spooked horse had thrown him, breaking his neck instantly. Now the fire had claimed everything else. "Ain't nothing worth saving, ma'am," said the weathered ranch hand who'd helped fight the blaze. "Best move on, these parts ain't kind to a woman alone." Hazel lifted her chin. "I have nowhere to go." The man shrugged, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving her to the silence of the prairie. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying away the last tendrils of smoke. In the distance, the Bighorn Mountains stood purple against the horizon, indifferent to her suffering. Her wedding ring caught the sunlight as she wiped a tear from her cheek. Survival, that's what mattered now. Love had been a fool's errand in a land that took more than it gave. James had promised her the world, and now she stood alone among the ashes. 100 miles away, in the growing town of Clearwater Springs, Nathan Xavier stood at his office window, watching his 5-year-old daughter Emma playing in the garden below. His clean-shaven face was serious beyond his 26 years, his eyes shadowed with the responsibility that had come too early. As the most successful cattle rancher in the territory, Nathan had built an empire from nothing but grit and determination. The 2-story house at the edge of town stood as testament to his accomplishments. Yet for all his wealth, the hollow feeling in his chest never quite disappeared. "Papa, look," Emma called, holding up a fistful of wildflowers. Her golden curls bounced as she ran toward the house. She was the spitting image of her mother, Caroline, a fact that brought both joy and pain. Nathan forced a smile and waved. Caroline had died bringing Emma into the world, and he'd sworn he would never let himself be vulnerable again. The business of raising a child and building a cattle empire left no room for sentiment. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when his daughter depended solely on him. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper who helped care for Emma, appeared at his office door. "Mr. Xavier, the new schoolteacher, still hasn't arrived. Town council's mighty worried with term starting next week." Nathan frowned. "Send a telegram to Cheyenne. We need someone qualified." "They've tried, sir. Nobody wants to come this far out." Mrs. Winters hesitated. "And if I might say so, that child needs a mother's hand. You can provide everything money can buy, but—" "That will be all, Mrs. Winters," Nathan said sharply. The housekeeper pressed her lips together and withdrew. Nathan turned back to the window. Emma was now crouched beside a butterfly, her small face alight with wonder. His chest tightened. Mrs. Winters wasn't wrong. Despite his wealth, he couldn't give Emma what she truly needed, a mother's love, a woman's guidance. His daughter was growing wild as the Wyoming wind, with only an aging housekeeper and ranch hands for company. "A man builds what he can protect," his father had taught him. Nathan had built an empire of cattle and land, but he couldn't seem to build a proper home. The business of cattle ranching consumed his days, leaving precious little time for a 5-year-old girl who asked increasingly difficult questions about the mother she'd never known. That night, as Nathan tucked Emma into bed, she gazed up at him with solemn eyes. "Tommy Wilkins says everyone has a mama. Where's mine, Papa?" Nathan smoothed her curls back from her forehead. "Your mama is in heaven, sweetheart. We've talked about this. But why can't I have a new mama? Sally Peterson got a new mama when her old one died." The innocent logic of a child struck him like a physical blow. "It's not that simple, Emma." "Why not? Don't you want a wife, Papa?" Nathan kissed her forehead. "I have you, that's enough for me." But as he closed her bedroom door, he wondered if that was true. The sprawling ranch house felt cavernous and empty. Success meant nothing if you came home to silence. Still, the frontier was no place for sentiment. Love was a weakness he couldn't afford, not again. 3 days later, Hazel Valens stepped off the stagecoach in Clearwater Springs, her entire life packed into one small trunk. Her brown hair was neatly coiled under a modest bonnet, and she'd brushed the trail dust from her blue dress as best she could. The town was larger than she'd expected, a proper main street with wooden boardwalks, a church steeple visible above the rooftops, and the promise of civilization. The stagecoach driver set her trunk on the ground. "Good luck to you, ma'am." Hazel thanked him, squared her shoulders, and headed toward the general store. The advertisement she'd seen in the Cheyenne newspaper had been specific. Teacher needed in Clearwater Springs. Room and board provided. Inquire at Holloway's general store. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. A portly man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. "Help you, miss." "I'm here about the teaching position," Hazel said, removing her gloves. "My name is Hazel Valens." Mr. Holloway's eyes widened. "Well, we weren't expecting anyone to answer that advertisement." "Been posted for months," he studied her. "You have experience." 2 years teaching in Pennsylvania before I married, and I've been tutoring ranch children since coming west." She didn't mention that those children were now scattered to the winds, their families having abandoned the drought-stricken area where she and James had tried to make a life. "Married, you say?" Mr. Holloway's gaze dropped to her ring. "Widowed," Hazel replied, lifting her chin slightly. 6 months ago." The storekeeper's expression softened. "Sorry to hear that. Well, the town council meets tomorrow. They'll want to interview you proper. Meantime, Mrs. Holloway can put you up at our boarding house." As Mr. Holloway escorted her to the boarding house, Hazel noticed a tall, broad-shouldered man walking down the street, a little girl skipping beside him. The man's serious expression contrasted with the child's carefree demeanor. Something about the pair caught her attention, perhaps the quality of the man's clothing or the way others nodded respectfully as he passed. "That's Nathan Xavier, mister," Holloway said, following her gaze. "Owns half the county, just about. His cattle operation's the biggest this side of the Bighorns." "And the child?" Hazel asked. "His daughter Emma, poor thing, lost her mother in childbirth, mister." "Xavier never remarried," he lowered his voice. "Between you and me, that child could use a woman's hand, running wild as can be, with just ranch hands and that old housekeeper to raise her." Hazel watched them disappear into a building marked Territorial Bank. For a moment, she felt a pang of recognition. The look in that man's eyes reminded her of something she saw in her own reflection. A wariness, a determination to stand alone against whatever came. The town council interview the next day was brief and to the point. The school term would begin the following Monday. 12 students were enrolled, ranging in ages from 6 to 15. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, with a small attached living space for the teacher. "It's not much," Mayor Thompson said apologetically, "but it's clean." Previous teacher left 6 months ago, got married to a man passing through. Since then, Mrs. Winters has been doing what she can, but with her duties at the Xavier house, it's not ideal. "I'm sure it will be perfectly adequate," Hazel replied. As she signed the contract, Hazel felt a small measure of relief. She had a position, a roof over her head, and a purpose. If this wasn't quite the life she had envisioned when she'd followed James west with stars in her eyes, it was at least a chance to survive. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Hazel scrubbed the teacher's quarters from top to bottom, arranged her few possessions, and familiarized herself with the school books. On Sunday, she attended church service, where she was introduced to many of her future pupils and their parents. It was there she encountered Nathan Xavier again. He sat in a pew near the front, his daughter fidgeting beside him. The child's golden curls were neatly combed, but her dress was buttoned incorrectly, and her stockings were mismatched. When the congregation stood to sing, Emma's clear voice rose enthusiastically, if not quite in tune. After the service, as Hazel shook hands with parents, Emma darted up to her. "Are you the new teacher?" she asked, blue eyes wide with curiosity. "I am," Hazel smiled, bending slightly. "And you must be Emma." "I'm 5 3/4, Emma announced proudly. "Papa says I can start school next year, but I want to come now." "Emma," Nathan Xavier's deep voice carried a note of warning as he approached. Up close he was even more imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with intense eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. Despite his youth, there was a gravity about him that commanded respect. "Don't bother, Miss." "Mrs." Valens, Hazel supplied, straightening. And your daughter isn't bothering me at all. Mrs. Valens, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Welcome to Clearwater Springs. Their eyes met, and Hazel felt a strange jolt of recognition. There was something in his gaze, a guarded quality, a careful distance, that mirrored her own approach to the world. Here was a man who, like her, understood that the frontier gave nothing freely and took without mercy. I hear you run the largest cattle operation in the territory, she said. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, as though he wasn't accustomed to direct conversation from women he'd just met. I do. Papa has 10,000 cows, Emma interjected, clearly proud. That's quite an accomplishment, Hazel said to Nathan. Hard work and good judgment, he replied, his tone matter of fact. Nothing more. Of course, Hazel's smile cooled slightly. If you'll excuse me, I should continue meeting my students' parents. As she moved away, she could feel his eyes on her. Nathan Xavier might be the wealthiest man in the county, but his dismissive tone suggested he was also among the most arrogant. She put him from her mind and focused on the task ahead, becoming the teacher these children needed. The first day of school arrived with a crisp September chill in the air. Hazel rang the school bell at 8 o'clock sharp, watching as children emerged from various directions, lunch pails in hand. Some arrived on horseback, others walked from town. Their ages and backgrounds varied widely, from the blacksmith's 6-year-old son to the banker's 15-year-old daughter. To Hazel's surprise, Emma Xavier was among them, clutching a slate and primer. Behind her, Nathan sat atop a magnificent bay horse, his expression unreadable. Mr. Xavier, Hazel said, approaching the horse, I believe your daughter isn't quite old enough for enrollment. She's advanced for her age, he replied, and determined to attend. Even so. I can read already, Emma interrupted eagerly. Papa taught me my letters and Mrs. Winters helps with sums. Hazel looked from the hopeful child to her impassive father. The school board has approved it, Nathan finished. I spoke with Mayor Thompson yesterday. His tone made it clear that his influence had settled the matter. Hazel pressed her lips together. Very well. But she'll need to follow the same rules as the other children. A ghost of a smile crossed Nathan's face. That's why she's here, Mrs. Valens. My daughter could benefit from some discipline. He tipped his hat. Good day. As he rode away, Hazel couldn't decide whether to be annoyed at his presumption or intrigued by his apparent awareness of his shortcomings as a parent. Pushing the thought aside, she ushered the children into the schoolhouse to begin the term. Emma proved to be bright but restless. She knew her letters as claimed but had trouble sitting still. During arithmetic lessons, she fidgeted constantly. At recess, she organized the younger children into an elaborate game involving imaginary horses and cattle rustlers. Miss Emma, Hazel said when the child returned flushed and disheveled, ladies don't roll in the dirt. I'm not a lady, Emma replied matter-of-factly. I'm a cowgirl. The other children giggled, and Hazel had to work to maintain her stern expression. Even cowgirls must learn their sums. Now take your seat. By the end of the first week, Hazel had settled into a routine. The children were responding well to her structured approach, even Emma, who seemed to thrive on clear expectations. Each day after school, Hazel would spend an hour preparing lessons, then walk through town to purchase supplies or visit the small lending library. It was during one such walk that disaster struck. A sudden commotion erupted on the main street as a team of horses pulling a heavy wagon broke free from their handler. The animals, panicked by something, thundered down the street directly toward where Emma Xavier was walking with Mrs. Winters. Without thinking, Hazel dropped her books and lunged forward, grabbing Emma around the waist and diving toward the boardwalk. They tumbled together onto the rough wood as the team of horses thundered past, missing them by inches. For a moment Hazel lay still, the child clutched protectively against her. Then Emma wriggled free, her eyes wide. That was exciting, she exclaimed, seemingly unaware of how close she'd come to being trampled. Hazel's heart pounded as she sat up, checking the child for injuries. Are you hurt? No, ma'am. Emma was already brushing dirt from her dress with the casual indifference of a child accustomed to mishaps. Mrs. Winters hurried over, her face pale. Land sakes, Miss Emma, you could have been killed. A crowd had gathered, and through it came Nathan Xavier, moving with purpose. His usual composed expression had shattered into naked fear as he shouldered past onlookers. When he saw Emma standing unharmed, relief washed over his features, followed quickly by his customary reserve. "Papa," Emma ran to him, "Mrs. Valens saved me from the horses." Nathan knelt and embraced his daughter, his eyes closing briefly. When he stood, he kept one hand on Emma's shoulder as he approached Hazel, who was being helped to her feet by the general store owner. "Mrs. Valens," his voice was gruff with emotion. "I owe you a debt I can't repay." Hazel brushed dust from her skirt, wincing as she discovered a scraped palm. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone did, you did." His gaze was intense, searching her face as though seeing her clearly for the first time. "You're injured." "It's nothing, a scrape." She showed him her palm, reddened but barely bleeding. "Mrs. Winters, take Emma home," Nathan instructed. "Mrs. Valens, please allow me to escort you to the doctor." "That's hardly necessary." "I insist." There was a note in his voice that brooked no argument. "It's the least I can do." As they walked toward the doctor's office, Hazel was acutely aware of the whispers and glances from townspeople. Being seen with Nathan Xavier was apparently noteworthy in Clearwater Springs. "You must think me overprotective," Nathan said suddenly. "Not at all. Emma is your only child." He nodded. "And all I have left of her mother." After a pause, he added, "I understand you're a widow." Yes, Hazel didn't elaborate. The pain of James's death had dulled to an ache, but speaking of it still felt like pressing on a bruise. "The frontier is unforgiving to those who face it alone," Nathan said quietly. Hazel glanced at him. "Are you alone, Mr. Xavier, with your wealth and position?" A sardonic smile touched his lips. "Wealth doesn't keep you warm at night, Mrs. Valens." The frank statement caught her off guard. Before she could respond, they reached the doctor's office. The visit was brief, her injuries were indeed minor. When they emerged, Nathan cleared his throat. "Would you do me the honor of dining at my home tomorrow evening? Emma has been talking of nothing but you all week, and after today's events, I'd like to express my gratitude properly." Hazel hesitated. Accepting such an invitation would set tongues wagging in the small town. Yet the sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable, and she found herself curious about this man who had built an empire yet couldn't properly button his daughter's dress. "Very well," she agreed. "Thank you." Nathan Xavier's house was impressive by any standard, but especially for a frontier town. 2 stories of solid construction with a wide veranda, it stood at the edge of town where the streets gave way to open country. As Hazel approached the following evening, wearing her best dress of dark green wool, she noted the well-tended gardens and the comfortable rocking chairs on the porch, touches that suggested a desire for home, not just shelter. Emma greeted her at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "Papa said I could stay up late tonight because you're coming," she announced, grabbing Hazel's hand and pulling her inside. "Do you want to see my kittens?" "They were born in the stable last week." "Perhaps after dinner," Hazel suggested with a smile. The interior of the house reflected the same duality she'd observed outside, wealth evident in the quality furnishings, yet with a distinct lack of feminine touches. The walls were bare of decorations, the furniture arranged with function rather than comfort in mind. Nathan appeared from what appeared to be a study, looking somehow different in his home environment. He'd exchanged his usual rugged attire for a proper suit, and his dark hair was neatly combed. Without the customary hat shadowing his features, she noticed for the first time how the lines around his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Mrs. Valens, welcome," he offered a slight bow. "I hope you found the house without difficulty." "It would be hard to miss the grandest house in town," she replied with a hint of teasing. A flicker of something, embarrassment perhaps, crossed his face. "Not grand by Eastern standards, I'm sure, but it serves its purpose." "As all homes should," Hazel agreed. "Emma was just about to show me her kittens." "After dinner," Nathan said firmly to his daughter, who pouted momentarily before brightening again. "Mrs. Winters made apple pie," she confided to Hazel. "It's Papa's favorite." Dinner was served in a formal dining room that seemed at odds with the frontier setting. The elderly Mrs. Winters served them with the efficiency of long practice, though Hazel noticed she hovered protectively near Emma, helping the child when needed. The conversation flowed more easily than Hazel had expected. Nathan asked intelligent questions about her teaching methods and listened attentively to her responses. When she mentioned her previous teaching experience in Pennsylvania, he surprised her with his knowledge of the area. "I spent 2 years in Philadelphia before heading west," he explained. "My father thought I should understand finance before taking over the family ranch in Colorado." "So you weren't always in Wyoming?" Nathan shook his head. "I came here 10 years ago with nothing but determination and my father's advice ringing in my ears. The ranch in Colorado had failed after his death, poor management by my stepmother's new husband." A shadow crossed his face. "I swore I'd build something that couldn't be taken away." "And you have," Hazel observed, looking around the well-appointed dining room. "At a cost," he replied quietly. Before she could ask what he meant, Emma interrupted with a detailed account of her day's adventures, and the moment passed. After dinner, true to her promise, Hazel allowed Emma to show her the kittens in the stable. The child's excitement was infectious as she carefully handled the tiny creatures, explaining their different personalities with the utmost seriousness. "This one's the bravest," she declared, holding up a striped kitten. "Like Papa." "Your father is brave?" Hazel asked, accepting the small bundle of fur. "The bravest," Emma said with absolute certainty. "He's not scared of anything, not bears or wolves or even bad men with guns." Hazel glanced toward the house where Nathan stood on the porch, watching them. "Everyone is afraid of something, Emma." "What are you afraid of, Mrs. Valens?" The direct question, delivered with childish innocence, caught Hazel off guard. What was she afraid of? Poverty? Loneliness, or perhaps the very thing that had brought her west in the first place, the wild hope that life could be more than mere existence. "I suppose I'm afraid of wasting the time I've been given," she answered honestly. Emma considered this with a furrowed brow. "Is teaching school wasting time?" "No," Hazel smiled. "Teaching is a very important job." "More important than cows?" Hazel laughed, different, not more or less important. "Your father raises cattle to feed people. I teach children so they can grow up to be smart and capable." "Like me," Emma said with satisfaction, returning the kitten to its mother. "Exactly like you." As they walked back to the house, Nathan came to meet them. "Did the kittens meet with your approval, Mrs. Valens?" "They're delightful," Hazel replied. "Though I fear your daughter may be campaigning to bring one inside the house." Nathan raised an eyebrow at Emma, who immediately adopted an innocent expression. "Stable cats belong in the stable," he said firmly. "But Papa—" Emma, there was a warning note in his voice. The child sighed dramatically. "Yes, Papa." "It's past your bedtime, young lady. Say good night to Mrs. Valens." To Hazel's surprise, Emma threw her arms around her waist in an impulsive hug. "Good night, Mrs. Valens. Will you come again soon?" The open affection touched something in Hazel's heart that she'd thought had died with James. "If your father invites me, perhaps I will." After Mrs. Winters had taken Emma inside to prepare for bed, Nathan offered Hazel his arm. "Would you care to walk in the garden? The evening is mild." The garden was simple but well tended, with native wildflowers and herbs growing in orderly beds. A stone pathway wound through it, leading to a small bench beneath an apple tree. "Emma seems to be adapting well to school," Hazel commented as they strolled. "Thanks to you," Nathan replied. "She talks about you constantly. Mrs. Valens says this, and Mrs. Valens does that." He smiled slightly. "I believe you've made quite an impression." "She's a remarkable child." Hazel hesitated, then added, "She misses having a mother." Nathan's expression grew somber. "I know. It's my greatest regret that she'll never know Caroline." After a pause, he continued, "My wife was everything I'm not, gentle, patient. She saw beauty where I see only utility." "Yet you've created a beautiful home," Hazel observed. "A house," he corrected. "Not quite a home, I think." He gestured toward the garden. "Caroline planned this space. I've maintained it as best I can, but it lacks the touch of someone who understands its purpose beyond practical herbs and edible fruits." They reached the bench, and Nathan offered her a seat. The evening air was cool but not unpleasant, carrying the scent of sage and distant pine. "May I ask about your husband?" Nathan's question was gentle. Hazel looked down at her hands, where her wedding ring still circled her finger. "James was a dreamer. He believed the West offered unlimited opportunity for those bold enough to seize it." she smiled sadly. He wasn't wrong exactly. There is opportunity here, but also danger and hardship he never anticipated. What happened? A riding accident. 6 months ago, she took a deep breath. And then 3 days ago, our ranch house burned to the ground. A lightning strike, they said. Nathan's expression showed genuine sympathy. So you came to Clearwater Springs with nothing. Not nothing, Hazel corrected him. I had my education and experience, my health. Sometimes that's enough. And sometimes it isn't, Nathan said quietly. The frontier is no place for someone alone. Hazel straightened her shoulders. I don't intend to remain alone forever, Mr. Xavier, but neither will I rush into another marriage simply for protection or provision. If I marry again, it will be on my terms. Nathan studied her face in the fading light. You're a remarkable woman, Mrs. Valens. The compliment, delivered with such simple sincerity, brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. I'm merely practical. No, he said softly, you're brave, there's a difference. As he walked her back to the boarding house later that evening, Hazel found herself unexpectedly comfortable in Nathan Xavier's presence. The arrogance she'd perceived in their first meeting seemed more like reserve now, a protective shell rather than true hauteur. At the boarding house steps, Nathan removed his hat. Thank you for coming this evening. Emma was delighted, and he hesitated. I enjoyed your company more than I expected to. Hazel couldn't help but laugh. Such flattery, Mr. Xavier. A genuine smile transformed his serious face. I'm not accustomed to pleasant social conversation, Mrs. Valens. Cattle don't require much in the way of small talk. Then perhaps you should practice more often. His eyes held hers. I would like that very much. As autumn deepened, a pattern emerged. Every Friday, Nathan would invite Hazel to dinner at his home. Emma would eagerly show her teacher the week's accomplishments, a drawing, a new kitten trick she'd taught, a sample or misses. Winters was helping her stitch. After the child went to bed, Nathan and Hazel would talk, sometimes in the garden until the chill drove them inside, sometimes before the fire in his study. Hazel learned that behind Nathan's successful exterior lay a man haunted by his past failures. The loss of his father's ranch in Colorado had shaped his determination to succeed at any cost. Caroline's death had left him terrified of emotional attachment. I wasn't there when she needed me, he confessed one evening as they sat before the fire. I was in Cheyenne closing a land deal. If I'd been home, you might not have been able to save her, Hazel said gently. Childbirth is dangerous even with the best care. Perhaps, his hands tightened around his glass, but I'll never know. And Emma will never know her mother. She knows you, Hazel pointed out, a father who loves her fiercely. Nathan's gaze shifted to her face. Not well enough, I fear. A girl needs a woman's guidance. Mrs. Winters is nearly 70 and can barely keep up with Emma's energy. He set down his glass. The truth is, Hazel, I've been considering sending her east to my late wife's sister. She has daughters of her own, a proper home. The thought of Emma being sent away struck Hazel with unexpected force. You can't mean that. What choice do I have? I'm failing her. She deserves better than a father who's absent from dawn till dusk and doesn't know how to braid her hair or explain the things a young girl needs to understand. There are other solutions, Hazel said carefully. Nathan's eyes met hers. Are there? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Before Hazel could respond, Mrs. Winters entered to clear the tea things, and the moment passed. In town, Hazel became aware of whispers. Her regular visits to the Xavier home had not gone unnoticed. Mrs. Holloway at the boarding house dropped hints about eligible widowers and second chances at happiness. The banker's wife asked pointed questions about Hazel's intentions to remain in Clearwater Springs. You've caught his eye, that's certain, said Sarah Miller, mother of one of Hazel's students, as they sat together after church one Sunday. Nathan Xavier hasn't shown interest in any woman since Caroline died. We're friends, Hazel replied firmly. His daughter is my student. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Friends don't look at each other the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Hazel brushed aside the comment, but in the privacy of her small quarters behind the schoolhouse, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that her feelings for Nathan had grown beyond friendship. His strength and determination impressed her, but it was his vulnerability, the tenderness he showed with Emma, his honest recognition of his limitations as a parent that touched her heart. Yet caution held her back. Her marriage to James had been based on dreams rather than reality, and those dreams had crumbled in the harsh light of frontier life. Nathan might be more practical than James had been, but loving him would mean risking her hard-won independence. The schoolteacher's position gave her security and purpose. Marriage, even to a wealthy rancher, would mean surrendering control of her life once more. As winter approached, tensions in the territory increased. Rumors of trouble between cattle ranchers and homesteaders surfaced. Small farmers complained that the large cattle operations like Xavier's were pushing them off their land. One afternoon, as Hazel dismissed her students, she found Nathan waiting outside, his expression grave. "May I speak with you?" he asked formally. "Of course." She ushered the last children out and closed the schoolhouse door. "Is something wrong? Is Emma?" "Emma is fine," he assured her. "But there's trouble brewing. The situation with the homesteaders is worsening." Hazel frowned. "I've heard rumors." "They're more than rumors." Nathan paced the length of the schoolroom. "Two of my men were ambushed yesterday while checking the northern boundary. No one was seriously hurt, but it's a sign of what's coming." "Surely the law—" "The law is 3 days' ride away at the county seat," Nathan interrupted. And stretched thin already, he turned to face her. "I'm sending Emma to Cheyenne tomorrow with Mrs. Winters. My sister-in-law will meet them there." Hazel's heart sank. "You're sending her away after all." "Just until this situation resolves." Nathan's expression softened as he saw her distress. "I don't want to, Hazel, but I can't risk her safety." "Of course not." Hazel struggled to hide her disappointment. She'd grown fond of the child, more than fond. "When will they return?" "That depends on how quickly this conflict can be resolved." He approached her, his expression intent. "I'd feel better if you went with them." The suggestion took her by surprise. "Leave, but the school." "Can manage without you for a few weeks. Your safety matters more." His concern touched her, but Hazel shook her head. "My place is here, Nathan. These children need their education, especially in uncertain times." Frustration flickered across his face. "Always so stubborn." "Always so protective," she countered with a slight smile. Their eyes met and something shifted in the air between them. Nathan stepped closer. "I worry about you." "I can take care of myself." Despite her words, Hazel didn't move away. "I know you can." His voice had softened. "That's part of what I admire about you." Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door banged open. Tommy Wilkins, one of her older students, stood there breathless. "Mrs. Valens, there's men with guns in town. Pa says they're here about the range war." Nathan's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here," he ordered Hazel, already moving toward the door. "Nathan," she began, but he was gone, following Tommy toward the commotion. Ignoring his instruction, Hazel hurried after them. In the town square, a tense scene was unfolding. A group of about 15 men on horseback faced off against the town's hastily assembled defenders. Mayor Thompson stood on the steps of the bank, attempting to mediate. "No quarrel with the town," one of the riders was saying as Hazel approached. "Our business is with Xavier and the other big ranchers who think they own the territory." "This isn't the way to settle grievances," the mayor replied. The law favors men with money," another rider spat. "We've filed claims legally, improved the land as required, and still we find our fences cut and our water sources mysteriously drying up." Nathan stepped forward, his posture straight and unyielding. "If you have specific complaints against my operation, Jensen, bring them to me directly. Don't threaten innocent townspeople." The man called Jensen sneered. "Like you threatened the millers when they wouldn't sell, or the Washburns when they diverted water for their crops." "I've never threatened anyone," Nathan replied evenly, "and I've always respected legal claims." "Tell that to my brother," Jensen retorted. "Shot at by your men last month when he was checking his north boundary." "Your brother was 20 miles inside my property line," Nathan countered. "And no one shot at him. A warning shot was fired over his head after he refused to identify himself." The tension in the air was palpable. Hazel could see hands hovering near weapons on both sides. This could escalate into violence at any moment. Without thinking, she stepped forward. Gentlemen, surely this can be resolved without bloodshed. All eyes turned to her. Nathan's expression was thunderous. Hazel, go back to the school. She ignored him. Mr. Jensen, is that right? I'm Mrs. Valens, the schoolteacher. Several homesteaders' children attend my classes. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here today? Jensen seemed taken aback by her direct approach. Ma'am, this isn't women's business. When armed men ride into the town where I teach, threatening violence that could endanger my students, it becomes my business, Hazel replied firmly. Now, do you have specific grievances that can be addressed, or are you merely here to intimidate? Her calm questioning seemed to take some of the fire out of the confrontation. Jensen shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. We want fair treatment, he finally said. Access to water, respect for our boundary lines. Those are reasonable requests, Hazel acknowledged, then turned to Nathan. Mr. Xavier, as the largest landowner, perhaps you could initiate discussions with these gentlemen. Surely there's room for compromise that benefits everyone. Nathan's jaw was tight, but he gave a single nod. I'm willing to meet without weapons or threats to discuss legitimate concerns. Mayor Thompson seized the opportunity. The town hall is available tomorrow. Both sides can bring representatives and I'll moderate the discussion. Slowly, reluctantly, Jensen agreed. Tomorrow at noon, but if this is some kind of trap. No trap, Nathan assured him. Just talk. As the homesteaders rode away, the tension in the square gradually dispersed. Nathan turned to Hazel, his expression a mixture of anger and admiration. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, he said in a low voice. What were you thinking, putting yourself between armed men? I was thinking that no one wanted bloodshed today, Hazel replied. Those men have families too, Nathan. His expression softened. You're a remarkable woman, Hazel Valens. He glanced around at the dispersing crowd. Come, I need to get Emma ready for tomorrow's journey, and I'd rather not leave you alone in town tonight. The Xavier house was a flurry of activity as Mrs. Winters packed for the journey to Cheyenne. Emma was excited about the trip but dismayed to learn that Hazel wouldn't be accompanying them. But who will tell me stories on the stagecoach? She pouted. Mrs. Winters tells wonderful stories, Hazel assured her, helping the child fold a nightgown. And your Aunt Rebecca has 2 daughters who are excited to meet you. Will you write to me? Emma asked, suddenly serious. Papa is terrible at letters. He just says I am well and be good and nothing interesting. Hazel laughed. I promise to write you very interesting letters, and you must write back and tell me all about Cheyenne. As Emma returned to her packing, Nathan appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Winters says dinner will be delayed. She's still preparing food for their journey. I'm happy to help, Hazel offered, rising from where she'd been kneeling beside Emma's trunk. In the kitchen, she found the elderly housekeeper flustered and behind schedule. With quiet efficiency, Hazel took over preparing the evening meal while Mrs. Winters concentrated on packing provisions for the journey. By the time they called Nathan and Emma to the table, a simple but satisfying dinner was ready. You didn't have to cook, Nathan said as they sat down. I don't mind, Hazel smiled at Mrs. Winters, and Mrs. Winters had her hands full with travel preparations. After dinner, Nathan took Hazel aside. I've asked Deputy Collins to check on you regularly while I'm occupied with this homesteader situation. The school is isolated, and I don't trust Jensen and his friends to honor our agreement. I'll be fine, Hazel assured him, but I appreciate your concern. His eyes searched her face. When this is resolved, when Emma returns, we should talk, you and I. About what? Hazel asked, though something in his expression made her heart beat faster. About the future. He took her hand, his touch gentle despite his calloused fingers. I've been alone since Caroline died. I thought that was safer for Emma, for me. But these past months you've shown me what I've been missing. Hazel's breath caught. Nathan. Not now, he interrupted softly. There's too much uncertainty. But when Emma returns, when this danger has passed. The front door burst open and Deputy Collins rushed in. Xavier, Jensen's men have set fire to the North Range. Your foreman sent a rider. They need every man they can get. Nathan's expression hardened instantly. He dropped Hazel's hand and turned to the deputy. Gather as many men as you can. I'll meet you at the livery in 10 minutes. As Collins rushed out, Nathan turned back to Hazel. I have to go, stay here tonight, you'll be safer. Of course, go. He hesitated just a moment, then surprised her by leaning down to place a swift, hard kiss on her lips. Before she could respond, he was gone, calling orders to his ranch hands. Hazel's fingers rose to her lips, still feeling the pressure of his kiss. Everything was happening so quickly, the brewing conflict, Emma's departure, Nathan's implied proposal. Part of her wanted to retreat to protect herself from the risk of more loss. But another part, a part she'd thought died with James, yearned toward the possibility of a new beginning. The night passed in tense uncertainty. Mrs. Winters and Emma retired early, needing rest before their morning journey. Hazel remained awake, too restless to sleep, watching from the windows for any sign of Nathan's return. By dawn, he still hadn't come back. Mrs. Winters found her dozing in a chair by the front window. You should have gone to bed, dear, the older woman clucked. Mr. Xavier often stays out all night when there's trouble at the range. Has there been any word? Hazel asked, straightening her rumpled dress. Not yet, but the stagecoach leaves in 2 hours and we must be ready. Mrs. Winters hesitated. If he doesn't return in time. I'll see you and Emma safely on the stagecoach, Hazel promised. Emma was subdued during breakfast, picking at her food rather than eating. What if Papa doesn't come back to say goodbye? He'll do everything he can to be here, Hazel assured her. But if the ranch needs him, you'll understand, won't you? Just like a good cowgirl. The child nodded solemnly. Will you be here when I come home? The innocent question struck Hazel's heart. I hope so, Emma. Promise? Emma's blue eyes were suddenly intense. Promise you won't go away. Hazel hesitated. How could she make such a promise when the future was so uncertain? I promise I will do everything in my power to be here when you return. This seemed to satisfy the child, who returned to her breakfast with more enthusiasm. They were loading the luggage onto the wagon that would take them to the stagecoach office when Nathan finally appeared. He looked exhausted, his clothing smoke-stained and his face streaked with soot, but his expression lightened when he saw Emma. Papa, she ran to him and he scooped her up, hugging her tightly. I thought I'd miss you, he murmured into her hair. Mrs. Valens said you'd come, Emma told him. She said you'd never break a promise to me. Nathan's eyes met Hazel's over his daughter's head. Mrs. Valens is very wise. The goodbye at the stagecoach office was brief but emotional. Nathan held Emma for a long moment, whispering instructions and endearments. When he finally set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. Take care of my girl, he told Mrs. Winters, who nodded solemnly. Like she was my own, the housekeeper promised. As the stagecoach pulled away, Emma waved frantically from the window. Hazel and Nathan stood side by side, waving back until the vehicle disappeared around a bend in the road. She'll be safe in Cheyenne, Nathan said, as much to himself as to Hazel. Yes, she will, Hazel touched his arm gently. And now you should rest, you look exhausted. He shook his head, no time. The meeting with Jensen and the homesteaders is at noon. Surely after a night fighting fires. Fires they set, Nathan said grimly. This meeting is more important than ever. He looked down at his disheveled appearance. Though I should change first. Let me help you prepare, Hazel offered. You need clear thoughts for this negotiation. Back at the house, while Nathan bathed and changed, Hazel prepared a substantial meal and strong coffee. When he emerged looking more like himself in clean clothes despite the fatigue evident in his face, she had everything ready. Eat, she instructed, then we'll discuss your approach to the meeting. His eyebrows rose. Wait, unless you prefer to handle it alone, she met his gaze steadily. Those homesteaders listened to me yesterday, they might again today. A slow smile spread across Nathan's face. You continually surprise me, Hazel Valens. Good, she pushed a plate toward him. Now eat. You'll need your strength. The town hall was packed when they arrived. Mayor Thompson had arranged tables in a rough circle, with chairs for representatives from both sides. Jensen and 3 other homesteaders sat to one side, their expressions wary. Nathan took his place opposite them, with 2 other major ranchers beside him. Hazel stood behind Nathan's chair, aware of the curious glances her presence attracted. Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order. Gentlemen, We're here to address the grievances brought forward by the homesteading families and find a peaceful resolution with the established ranching operations." What followed was 2 hours of heated discussion. Water rights were the primary concern. The homesteaders claimed the large ranches were diverting streams and preventing access to rivers. Boundary disputes came second, with accusations of fence cutting and intimidation on both sides. Throughout, Hazel observed silently, noting the genuine frustration of the homesteaders and the defensive posture of the ranchers. Nathan maintained a calmer demeanor than his peers, actually listening to the complaints rather than dismissing them outright. When a particularly heated exchange threatened to derail the negotiations, Hazel stepped forward. "If I may," she interrupted, drawing all eyes to her. "It seems to me that both sides want the same thing, the ability to earn a living from this land and provide for their families." Jensen scoffed. "Xavier here already earns 10 times what any of us could hope to make." "Perhaps," Hazel acknowledged, "but he built that operation from nothing, just as you're trying to do with your homesteads." She turned to Nathan. "And surely, Mr. Xavier recognizes that diversity in the territory's economy strengthens everyone's position. Cattle ranching alone makes the entire region vulnerable to market fluctuations." Nathan studied her thoughtfully, then nodded. "Mrs. Valens makes a valid point. My concern has never been with legitimate homesteading, only with those who disregard property rights or threaten my operation." "And our concern," Jensen countered, "is survival. When a ranch the size of yours controls all the water sources for 20 miles, what are we supposed to do? Watch our crops wither and our livestock die of thirst?" A thoughtful expression crossed Nathan's face. "What if we established formal water access agreements, designated points where homesteaders could water livestock or draw irrigation, with clear understandings about quantities and timing?" The suggestion seemed to catch Jensen off guard. "You'd allow that?" "With proper safeguards," Nathan specified. "Written agreements, scheduled access to prevent overuse, shared responsibility for maintenance." Mayor Thompson leaned forward eagerly. "That's the kind of practical solution we need. What about the boundary disputes?" Gradually, point by point, the two sides began working toward compromise. Nathan surprised Hazel with his willingness to concede on issues he'd previously seemed inflexible about. By late afternoon, a framework for cooperation had been established, with the mayor documenting the agreements for all parties to sign. As the meeting dispersed, Jensen approached Nathan. "Never thought I'd see the day when Nathan Xavier compromised on anything." Nathan's expression remained neutral. "Times change, and Mrs. Valens made me see that there's room for all of us to succeed if we work together rather than against each other." Jensen glanced at Hazel with newfound respect. "Ma'am," he tipped his hat before following his companions out. When they were alone, Nathan turned to Hazel. "You were magnificent." "I merely pointed out what seemed obvious," she replied, though his praise warmed her. "Not to me." He took her hand. "I've been so focused on building something that couldn't be taken away, I never considered that cooperation might provide better protection than isolation." His words resonated beyond the immediate situation, and Hazel knew he felt it too. The parallel to his personal life, his self-imposed emotional isolation since Caroline's death, hung unspoken between them. "It's not easy to change perspective," Hazel said softly. "It takes courage." Nathan's fingers tightened around hers. "I find I have more courage when you're beside me." The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. The agreements with the homesteaders required implementation, establishing water access points, clarifying boundary markers, creating systems for addressing future disputes. Nathan threw himself into the work, but he also made time each day to visit Hazel at the schoolhouse or invite her to dine at his home. Without Emma as a buffer, their conversations grew more personal. Hazel learned about Nathan's childhood in Colorado, his complicated relationship with his father, and his dreams for the future. In turn, she shared stories of her own family in Pennsylvania, her decision to become a teacher, and her journey west with James. "Did you love him very much?" Nathan asked one evening as they sat before the fire in his study. Hazel considered the question carefully. "I loved the idea of him," she finally admitted, "the adventure he represented. He was so full of dreams and plans." She smiled sadly. The reality was, harder, James wasn't equipped for the difficulties of frontier life. He became frustrated, bitter. By the end, we were more partners in survival than husband and wife. And yet you stayed. Marriage vows don't come with exceptions for disappointment, Hazel said simply, and I'd made my choice. Nathan studied her face in the firelight. What would you choose now, knowing what you know about the realities of life out here? The question was weighted with unspoken meaning. Hazel met his gaze steadily. I would choose with clearer eyes. Not blinded by romantic notions or fear of being alone. And what would those clear eyes see in me, I wonder? Nathan's voice was low. Hazel's heart quickened. A man of integrity. Stubborn, sometimes arrogant, but willing to learn and change. A devoted father, a builder of things meant to last. He moved closer, taking her hand in his. And would that be enough? That depends, she replied softly, on what you see in me. Everything I never knew I needed, he said without hesitation. Strength without hardness, wisdom without pretension, beauty that comes from the inside out. His thumb traced circles on her palm. The first time I saw you stand up to me about Emma attending school, I knew you were different from any woman I'd met. Because I wasn't intimidated by your wealth or position, Hazel smiled. Because you saw what Emma needed more clearly than I did, his expression grew serious. You've helped me see many things more clearly, Hazel. The intimacy of the moment, the warmth of his hand holding hers, the intensity in his eyes, all of it threatened to overwhelm Hazel's carefully maintained composure. Part of her wanted to surrender to the feelings growing between them, but another part, the part that had learned caution through loss and disappointment, held back. Nathan, she began carefully, I care for you deeply, and for Emma. But a sharp knock at the front door interrupted her. Nathan's expression flickered with annoyance, but he rose to answer it. Deputy Collins stood on the porch, his face grave. Sorry to disturb you, Xavier, but there's trouble. Jensen's been shot. Nathan's entire demeanor changed instantly. How bad? Bad enough he's at Doc Miller's, claims it was one of your men. Hazel gasped, that can't be right. The agreement. I gave no such order, Nathan said firmly. All my men have strict instructions to respect the treaty. Well, someone put a bullet in him, Collins replied grimly. And if his friends believe it was on your orders. We could have another range war on our hands, Nathan finished. He turned to Hazel. I need to go sort this out. I'm coming with you, she said immediately. They might be more inclined to listen if I'm there. Nathan hesitated, clearly wanting to protect her, but then nodded. Stay close to me. Dr. Miller's office was crowded with angry homesteaders when they arrived. The atmosphere was volatile, with muttered threats and hostile glances directed at Nathan. Jensen lay on the examination table, pale but conscious, a bandage wrapped around his upper chest. Xavier, he rasped when he saw Nathan. Come to finish the job. I had nothing to do with this, Nathan replied steadily. None of my men would have acted without orders, and I gave no such orders. Then explain why it was your foreman Bates who pulled the trigger, demanded one of Jensen's companions. Nathan frowned. Bates, that's impossible. He's been in Cheyenne since yesterday, delivering papers to my lawyer. Then who was the man claiming to be your foreman? Jensen demanded. Rode up bold as brass, said he had a message from you about the water access point on the North Fork, then drew on me when I turned to read it. A cold feeling settled in Nathan's stomach. Describe him. Jensen's description matched none of Nathan's men, but it did match someone Nathan had fired 6 months earlier for stealing from the ranch supplies, a man named Harker who had sworn revenge. That's not my foreman, Nathan told them. That's a man I discharged for theft who apparently has a grudge against both of us. He explained the situation to the increasingly receptive crowd. Jensen closed his eyes briefly. Always knew Harker was trouble. He approached us last month, offering information about your operation. I turned him away. He's trying to reignite the conflict, Hazel realized, set us against each other again. And nearly succeeded, Nathan acknowledged grimly. He turned to the homesteaders. I give you my word that this was not my doing, and I'll prove it by helping you track down the real culprit. The atmosphere in the room gradually shifted from hostile to cautiously cooperative. Nathan organized search parties with mixed groups of ranchers and homesteaders to ensure trust. Hazel returned to the schoolhouse, promising to spread the truth about what had happened. For 3 days, the search continued without success. Hazel maintained her teaching schedule, but worry gnawed at her. Nathan was out with the search parties from dawn till dusk, sometimes not returning until well after midnight. The peaceful cooperation they'd worked so hard to establish felt precarious. On the 4th day, as Hazel was dismissing her students, a shot rang out from behind the schoolhouse. The children screamed and Hazel rushed them inside, barricading the door. Through the window, she could see a man approaching, matching the description of Harker that Nathan had given her. Mrs. Valens, he called, his voice carrying across the schoolyard. Send the children home. My quarrel isn't with them. The children are staying where they're safe, Hazel called back. What do you want, Mr. Harker? He laughed, an ugly sound. So Xavier told you about me. Good, then you know I have a score to settle. With Mr. Xavier, perhaps, not with innocent children or with me. Harker moved closer, and Hazel could now see the gun in his hand. You're his woman, aren't you? The schoolteacher he's sweet on. Everyone in town's talking about it. Fear tightened Hazel's throat, but she kept her voice steady. Whatever grievance you have with Mr. Xavier, this is not the way to address it. Oh, but it is, Harker countered. You see, taking his money or his cattle wouldn't hurt him the way taking you will. A cruel smile twisted his features. Xavier took everything from me when he fired me, my reputation, my livelihood. Only fair I take something precious from him. Inside the schoolhouse, the children huddled together, the oldest boy, Tommy Wilkins, standing protectively in front of the younger ones. Mrs. Valens, he whispered, my pa keeps a gun in our wagon for wolves. It's hitched out back. Hazel's mind raced. The back door of the schoolhouse was on the opposite side from where Harker stood, if she could distract him. Mr. Harker, she called, the children are frightened. Let me send them home to their parents, and then you and I can talk. No one's going anywhere, Harker replied. Not until Xavier gets here. He's miles away with the search parties, Hazel informed him. It could be hours. Harker's expression darkened. Then we wait, but just to make sure he comes running, he raised his gun and fired into the air. The children whimpered, and Hazel made a swift decision. Tommy, she whispered, I'm going to keep him talking. You slip out the back way and run for help. The rest of you stay down and away from the windows. Tommy nodded solemnly and crept toward the back door while Hazel returned to the window. Mr. Harker, shooting won't solve anything. It will only ensure you hang when the law catches up with you. The law, Harker spat. What law? Out here men like Xavier make the law. Men with money and power. While he ranted, Hazel saw Tommy slip out the back door and dash toward his father's wagon. Her heart raced, praying the boy wouldn't be spotted. Mr. Xavier worked for everything he has, Hazel countered, keeping Harker's attention fixed on her. Just as you could if you chose honest work instead of revenge. Harker's face contorted with rage. Don't you lecture me, woman. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. Don't I? Hazel's voice rose. I lost my husband and my home. I came to this town with nothing but the clothes on my back, but I didn't blame others for my misfortune, and I didn't seek revenge. Out of the corner of her eye, Hazel saw Tommy returning, moving low through the tall grass behind the schoolhouse, something clutched in his hands. Harker had moved closer to the schoolhouse, his gun now aimed directly at the window where Hazel stood. Your precious Xavier will be sorry he ever crossed me, when he finds you dead in his precious schoolhouse. A shot rang out, but not from Harker's gun. The man cried out, dropping his weapon as he clutched his shoulder. Tommy stood at the corner of the schoolhouse, his father's rifle wavering in his young hands. Run, Mrs. Valens, the boy shouted. Harker recovered quickly, diving for his fallen gun with his good arm. Hazel flung the door open and rushed out, not toward safety but toward Tommy, determined to protect the boy who had so bravely defended his classmates. Before Harker could retrieve his weapon, hoofbeats thundered into the schoolyard. Nathan arrived with several riders, having heard the shots from their search position nearby. They surrounded Harker, disarming him as he cursed and struggled. Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion and strode toward Hazel, who stood with her arm around Tommy's shoulders. Are you hurt? His eyes scanned her frantically. We're unharmed, Hazel assured him, though her knees felt weak with relief. Thanks to Tommy's quick thinking. Nathan knelt before the boy, his expression solemn. That was a brave thing you did, son. Dangerous, but brave. Tommy straightened, still holding the rifle carefully pointed at the ground as his father had taught him. Mrs. Valens protects us every day, had to protect her back. Nathan's eyes met Hazel's over the boy's head, and the emotion in them made her breath catch. Without a word, he rose and pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he might never let go. I thought I'd lost you, he murmured against her hair. Hazel clung to him, the fear she'd suppressed for the children's sake finally overwhelming her. He wanted to hurt you through me. I know, Nathan's arms tightened. When I heard the shots, he couldn't finish. Over his shoulder, Hazel could see the other riders securing Harker for transport to the county jail. The children were emerging cautiously from the schoolhouse, running to parents who had begun to arrive, drawn by the commotion. Mayor Thompson approached, his expression grave. Mrs. Valens, are you well enough to give an account of what happened here? Nathan released her reluctantly, keeping one arm firmly around her waist. Can't this wait? It's all right, Hazel assured him. The sooner this matter is settled, the better for everyone. The aftermath of Harker's capture was swift and definitive. His attempt to rekindle the range war by shooting Jensen and then threatening the schoolteacher and children erased any sympathy he might have garnered. Even more significantly, the crisis had united the ranchers and homesteaders in common cause. Men who had been enemies weeks earlier now worked side by side to improve security in the region. 2 weeks later, Nathan received a telegram from Cheyenne. Emma and Mrs. Winters would return on Saturday's stage. The homesteader situation had been resolved. Harker was securely in the county jail awaiting trial, and it was safe for his daughter to come home. He rode directly to the schoolhouse to share the news with Hazel. She was alone, the students having been dismissed an hour earlier. When she saw his smile, she knew immediately. Emma's coming home, she guessed, setting down her chalk. Saturday, Nathan closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Hazel, before Emma returns, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart quickened. Yes. These past weeks, even with the danger, even with the conflicts, have been the most alive I've felt since Caroline died. His eyes held her steadily. You've shown me that it's possible to build something new without dishonoring what came before. Hazel squeezed his hands. You've shown me the same. When I thought Harker might harm you, his voice roughened. I realized that all the wealth and land in the territory means nothing compared to the people I love, Emma, and you, Hazel. I love you. The words, spoken with such simple certainty, brought tears to her eyes. I love you too, Nathan. I think I have for some time. Relief and joy transformed his face. He pulled her closer. Then marry me, be Emma's mother. Be my wife, my partner in everything. Hazel looked up at this man who had grown so dear to her, who had shown her that love could bloom even in the harsh soil of the frontier, who had proved that strength and vulnerability could exist in the same heart. Yes, she said simply, yes to all of it. His kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. Emma will be overjoyed. She's been asking in every letter when I'm going to make you her new mama. Hazel laughed. Has she now? And what did you tell her? That I was working up my courage. His smile was rueful. Facing down armed homesteaders was less intimidating than asking you to share my life. Well, Mr. Xavier, Hazel said, wrapping her arms around his neck, your courage has been rewarded. Saturday dawned clear and bright. Nathan and Hazel waited together at the stagecoach office, his arm around her waist, her head occasionally resting against his shoulder. They had agreed to tell Emma about their engagement immediately. The child had endured enough uncertainty in her young life. When the stagecoach rolled into town, Emma's face appeared at the window before the vehicle had even stopped. The moment the door opened, she flew into her father's arms. Papa, I missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetheart. Nathan held her tightly, then set her down so she could greet Hazel. Emma threw her arms around Hazel's waist. Mrs. Valens, did you get my letters? Did you like the drawing I sent of the Capitol building? Aunt Rebecca took me to see it. I loved your drawing, Hazel assured her, smoothing the child's golden curls. And yes, I received all your letters. I kept every one. Emma beamed, then looked from her father to Hazel with sudden perception. "You're holding hands," she observed, "and Papa is smiling. He hardly ever smiles that big." Nathan and Hazel exchanged amused glances. "Emma," Nathan said, kneeling to her level, "Mrs. Valens and I have something important to tell you." Emma's eyes widened. "Is it a secret?" "Not anymore," Nathan replied. "Mrs. Valens has agreed to marry me. She's going to be your new mother if that's all right with you." For a moment Emma was still, processing this information. Then her face lit up with such pure joy that Hazel felt her heart might burst. "Really? Forever and ever?" The child looked to Hazel for confirmation. Hazel knelt beside Nathan, taking Emma's small hands in hers. "Really? Forever and ever?" Emma launched herself at them both, her arms stretching to encircle them in a fierce hug. "I knew it. I told Aunt Rebecca that Papa loved you and you loved him back and you were going to be my new mama." Over the child's head, Nathan's eyes met Hazel's, filled with a happiness that mirrored her own. In that moment, surrounded by the bustle of the growing town, with Emma's arms around them both, Hazel knew that she had found what she'd been searching for all along. Not just a home or security, but a family bound by love strong enough to weather any storm the frontier might bring. 3 weeks later, Hazel Valens became Hazel Xavier in a ceremony at the Clearwater Springs Church. The entire town turned out for the event, along with ranchers and homesteaders from miles around. Emma served as flower girl, solemnly scattering petals down the aisle before Hazel made her entrance in a gown of ivory satin that Nathan had ordered specially from Denver. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Xavier," Nathan whispered as they shared their first dance at the reception. "As do you, Mr. Xavier," she replied, admiring her husband in his formal suit. At 26, with the weight of constant worry lifted from his shoulders, he looked every bit the handsome, vital young man he was. Emma darted between the dancing couples to tug at Nathan's sleeve. "Papa, when are we going home, Mrs.? Winters says I need to go to bed soon, but I want to go home with you and Mama." The word Mama, spoken so naturally, brought tears to Hazel's eyes. She bent to kiss the child's forehead. "We'll all go home together very soon, sweetheart." Later that night, as they stood together on the veranda of what was now their home, Nathan drew Hazel into his arms. "Happy?" "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I was thinking about what Emma said earlier, about going home." Nathan's lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. "Home isn't just this house or this land," Hazel said softly. "It's us, the three of us together. That's what I've been searching for, I think. Not just a place to belong, but people to belong to." Nathan turned her in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight. "I spent years building something I thought would last, something that couldn't be taken from me, but it was empty without someone to share it with." His hand caressed her cheek. "You and Emma are what make it worth having." "I need a bride and you need a family," Hazel quoted with a smile. "Quite a straightforward arrangement." Nathan laughed, the sound free and unrestrained in a way it had never been before. "Is that what I said? It sounds so calculating." "Practical," Hazel corrected, "like the man himself. And yet here I am, hopelessly in love with my wife." He kissed her tenderly. "Nothing practical about that." "Nothing practical at all," Hazel agreed, returning his kiss with equal fervor. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." As the years passed, the Xavier Ranch prospered and expanded. The agreements Nathan had forged with the homesteaders proved beneficial to everyone, creating a stable community where once there had been conflict. Emma grew from a spirited child into a confident young woman, equally at home with books from her mother's extensive library or horses from her father's prized herd. And in time, she was joined by 2 brothers and a sister, completing the family that had begun that autumn day when a stubborn schoolteacher had stood her ground against the most powerful man in the county. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan and Hazel sat together on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains with gold. Their youngest child slept in Hazel's arms while the others played an elaborate game of their own invention in the garden below. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Coming west, all you endured before we met?" Hazel considered the question seriously. "No," she finally answered. "Each step of the journey, even the painful ones, led me here, to you. To our children, to this life we've built together." She smiled up at him. The frontier taught me what truly matters, not security or wealth or even comfort, but love freely given and received. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. You taught me the same. He glanced down at their sleeping daughter, then out at their older children laughing in the garden. When I think how close I came to sending Emma away, to continuing alone. But you didn't, Hazel reminded him. You were brave enough to open your heart again. Because you were brave first, he countered, pressing a kiss to her temple. My courageous Hazel, who faced down armed men to protect her students, who challenged a stubborn rancher to see beyond his fears. As the last light faded from the sky, Hazel leaned against her husband's strength and surveyed all they had built together. Not just the prosperous ranch or their fine home, but the family that filled it with laughter and love. The Wyoming frontier had taken much from her, but it had given back more than she could have imagined on that long-ago day when she'd stood before the ashes of her old life. I love you, Nathan Xavier, she whispered. And I love you, Hazel Xavier, he replied, today and all the days to come. In the gathering darkness, with their children safe and their home secure, they shared a kiss that held all the tenderness of new love and all the depth of a decade shared. The frontier had not defeated them. Together they had tamed it, creating a haven of love in a land that forgave no weakness and offered no quarter to those who faced it alone.